So this morning, Donald Trump is not just president-elect again. He just became $1 billion richer, at least on paper, as social media stock DJT surging ahead of the opening bell. And just moments ago, you can see that's not all that's up. The Dow now up nearly 1,300 points. All right, let's go over and talk to our friend Harry Etten, not looking at his 401k here, but looking at where and how the economy played in this election.
Yeah, I wish I was $1 billion richer. Look, James Carville said it best. It's the economy, stupid. And take a look at how folks felt about the condition of the nation's economy. 67% of voters said not good or poor. Awfully difficult to win when that 67%. And how did those 67% of voters vote in this election? We see, look at this march. Yeah, you can't win. I mean, look at that. Donald Trump, what is that? That's a 40-point margin among those who said that the economy was not good or poor, and that was the vast majority of voters. Now, I want to dig in a little bit deeper. I want to look at Latino voters and what they said was the most important issue for them. Look at this. 40% of Latino voters said the economy was their number one issue. And how did they vote? Those who said the economy was the top issue? We can see that they overwhelmingly by a 2-to-1 margin chose Donald Trump. We know from the exit polls that Latino voters, there was less support for Kamala Harris than any Democratic nominee on record since we started conducting exit polls in the early 70s. And I think the economy had a lot to do with it.
Just those two numbers at the beginning, how people rated the economy and how people who rated the economy voted. If you only knew that, you probably could have predicted the outcome of the election.
It turns out it is the economy, stupid.
All right, Harry, thank you very much. Let's go over to Phil Mattingly now at the Magic Wall to find out how and where these sentiments on the economy play the most.
What's so fascinating about this, we've all heard Democrats very frustrated because when you look at the top line macroeconomic numbers, there's every reason for somebody to feel good about the economy. Why aren't people feeling it? You would hear over and over again. For months, I've been staring at Pennsylvania because despite those good top line numbers, I'm going to pull up every county here where you see darker counties. That is where cost of living is, the wages and wage growth has not kept up with cost of living. The darker the county, the more difficult it has been for the people that live in that county. Now, I see you smiling. You see what I'm doing here because when you overlap the results from last night, counties that Donald Trump did very well in, counties that Donald Trump flipped, you will be very surprised to learn that right here and right here and right here in particular, but also right here, and now I'm going to show you. This was a county that, in 2020, was Joe Biden County. In 2024, Donald Trump flipped the county and flipped it by a sizable margin. What about Erie? This was a county that was a Joe Biden County. Back in 2020, won it narrowly. In 2024, he flipped it back into Trump's category. This was a county that was, in 2020, a Joe Biden County by a pretty substantial margin, more than 6 points. In 2024, it was flipped into Donald Trump's column. This is interesting based on what Harry was just talking about. This is Berks County. You move over here into Lehigh County. These are two counties where the highest level of Hispanic vote within the state, 20 to 25% in both of these counties. While Democrats were able to hang on to Lehigh County, this margin right here in Berks County, 55% to 43.3%. It was part of that kind of string of counties in the blue-collar center of the state, outside of the collar counties, where Donald Trump improved his margin in every single one of these counties. And again, I just want to show this real quick one more time because it's wild to look at when you get a sense of if people in Pennsylvania are frustrated about the economy, it turns out when you track where their wages were versus where the cost of living was, and you look at where the darker counties are, much of which not only Donald Trump improved on, but flipped those counties entirely, you understand not everyone was feeling it. Not everyone was feeling it in various parts around the country, but particularly in what both campaigns acknowledged was the most important state in this election, and a state where Donald Trump has, by all accounts, done better than he has in either of the prior two elections and flipped several counties that either Joe Biden wrested back control of back in 2020 or flipped, like Monroe County, the county entirely. John?
Such a good demonstration of how the economy mattered in the places that mattered most in this election. Let's now look at the right camera and also bring in our panel of experts here, starting with Matt Egan, because I got to say, investors like something this morning.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Wall Street is starting this next Trump era with a bang. We see the Dow up more than 1,200 points. It's about 3% on track for the best day on a percentage basis in 2 years. I think part of what we are seeing is a relief rally. Investors around the world are relieved that someone has emerged here as the clear-cut winner. There were fears among CEOs and investors that this could drag on for weeks or longer, that there could be social unrest, and that obviously would have created enormous uncertainty. But there's also an element of this that is relief that it is Trump that is the winner, because there are elements of the Trump agenda that are pro-business. Think about tax cuts, cutting red tape. That's why we've seen big bank stocks surging, because they're betting that Trump will cut regulation. That's why we're seeing crypto go straight up, and crypto and Bitcoin go straight up because of the red tape element. But market veteran Art Hogan, he told me this morning that he thinks that some of this enthusiasm could actually be short-lived, because there are also elements of the Trump agenda that are not pro-business, such as getting into fights with CEOs, massive tariffs, massive deportations, and a skyrocketing deficit. For now, though, investors are not paying any attention to those negatives, or they're betting that those campaign promises are not going to become a reality. Right now, the focus is on the positives.
So I'm not saying that investors and that Art Hogan aren't real people, because they are. By definition, they're all people. But, Professor, I am curious. If you're waking up today, one of these swing states or anywhere in this country, wondering, gosh, what's going to change for me economically now that Donald Trump is going back to the White House? What should you be thinking?
So the first thing I would be thinking about is the agenda on tariffs. That is the number one issue that I think most Americans, that has the most opportunity to affect the most widespread of an American audience. And I say tariffs because, these questions about deregulation, about cutting taxes, cutting corporate taxes, and cutting taxes for the wealthy affect a very small percentage of the population just off run. The tariffs, right, we actually have numbers about how that would affect everyday Americans. I think The Economist, Wall Street Journal estimated about $4,000 additional per year that you would be paying due to these tariffs. So if I'm an American, and I'm an average everyday American, I want to know what these tariffs are going to look like, when they're going to go into effect, how they are going to affect my bottom line, and really be worrying about that. So the real question is, will Trump actually be able to push that through? Or is that something that, say, the Republican Party decides they want to hold him on and not allow him to do?
Mark, it's interesting. Prices aren't going to go down. I mean, inflation may be stable at 2%, which is a good number for inflation, but prices aren't going to drop. And frankly, people shouldn't want prices to go down on things, because then you get into a deflationary cycle, and Matt can go on for hours about how that's not great for an economy either. But will there come a point in the next 6 months where some of these economic trends that have been positive over the last few months begin to sink in, and then who gets credit? Will it be Donald Trump because he's the guy there?
Well, he'll certainly take credit for it, as he's took credit for all the economic successes during the Biden administration. But, I mean, look, this is what I think we have to really think about. We discuss the word mandate. We talk a lot about it. We're going to hear a lot about it when it comes to economic policies over the next 6 to 8 months. But this is the reality. 75% of Americans thought, or at least told us, that they faced either some kind of moderate or severe hardship because of inflation. 3/4 of Americans. How does Kamala Harris go up against those winds? Those are headwinds that are impossible to break through. But this is what is really interesting in it all. Going into the election last night, Kamala Harris had a better favorability rating than Donald Trump. So keep that in mind. Donald Trump's favorability rating was 44%. Kamala Harris's was 48%, and he still won, and won so decisively. Again, why? Because people are feeling it in their pocketbook.
Yep. And the question they want to know is, when's that going to change for me, and will Donald Trump change it quickly?